There's also something to be said for these. Reading out all these trials to you and telling all these benefits, and I'm like, okay, yes, it all seems very good. Why did you guys not continue to do this after the trial ended?
Why was it a trial? Yeah,
Yeah, and it's like
okay.
you're really like, oh, this is the best thing we've ever done. So why did you stop it? It's like,
Yeah,
oh, see you
yeah.
later.
Yeah, man. What I genuinely feel like there's something we're not reading here.
There
Like
must be.
there's something else. Yeah, there's something else. That'll be an interesting one. Hopefully, we can go in if we find something out, give a wee update. Is because this feels like something we're on the cusp of it. Another revelation.
Yeah. 3, 2, 1. Yeah. So window open, window open over there. 30-degree heat. Let me tell you, I know you don't like the heat, but as a ginger, it's bad.
I thought it was the sun you don't like. Is it the heat? Okay,
It's all the sun is very bad. Yes, I like
they're
burning.
quite closely.
I burn if the sun's out and it's like 14 degrees. It's not even like the temperature actually. I just think if the sun's like out of the clouds and it like
Hmm.
contacts my skin for like a long time, I burn, and I just can't stand being in the heat for long periods of time. And like the suntan lotions like all melt on my body and it's like makes my skin really itchy and it's all.
SPF 50'd up.
Oh yeah, it's all horrible because you always put it on and like go straight out as well, and it like it's not dried in and it melts everywhere. It's the worst, especially if you're on holiday. When I go to like Florida or Spain or whatever, it's like an absolute no go. I just sit in the shade like the entire time. There's no point.
I deeply emphasize with you. Fucking talking about going on a holiday. It's literally 34 in my room right now. Well, not right now, but it was yesterday. I am melting. So this guide might be uh, a difficult one for both of us, but we're going to make it through it, man. Just think cool thoughts, and get your fan on as well while you're at it.
Yep. So if you didn't know, this is Guide to 21st Century, a conversational podcast between two friends, Lewis and I, discussing topical issues and trying to navigate the minefield that is life in the 21st century.
Each week so far, Scott and I went away and thought of a topic that's been kicking around our mic throughout the week, or kicking around our mind throughout the week, and we bring it to the episode where we basically disseminate our views and discuss that, break down in a little bit more detail, and we try and reach some type of conclusions that maybe we wouldn't have reached on our own.
Yeah, so recently I didn't realise this had been in the news,
Mm.
but that might have been subliminally how I've seen it. But I've kind of, over the past few weeks, I've started speaking about how I kind of believe that money is like the root of all evil. And I think
The last 3 months, yes.
yeah, I think I've became like one of those radicals that we're always warning people about, because I'm now starting to look at things like the 4-day working week, and I'm like, this is a fucking great idea, you know. So I'm
Hmm.
kind of starting to get concerned a little bit, that maybe I've gone so far away from money that the ideas that I'm willing to accept now,
Repels you.
the ideas that I'm willing to get on board with are just fucking crazy. So I guess what we'll find out. So yeah, anyway, this idea of the 4-day working week has kind of done the rounds in the news again recently, and it kind
Mhm.
of comes around every so often. I've done a bit of research today, and apparently it was like a Greens policy in the UK, and then like Labour jumped onto it, like it was during the last election. It was sort of like brought up. It wasn't seriously
Right, sure.
like spoken about. Thoughts and feelings on the 4-day working week before we even go anywhere.
Well, as I said, a couple of people have mentioned this to me because it was kicking around in the news, and my reply to them was, what I usually reply, which is like this: it's the same thing. It seems like it does the rounds every couple of years. Everyone talks about it, and like, it feels like another company will have tested it out, and they'll have positive results. I don't. I don't know. I've never seen any felt serious movement towards us actually moving towards that. Personally, though, seems like a bloody great idea, though, right? Having I don't look at it as a 4-day working week. It's a 3-day weekend, right?
Sure, but so when you're saying you don't see there's any movement towards it, see if you actually look back and over the last like 100, 200 years, the working week has like reduced drastically over like that
Mm.
period of time. And I'm not sure how it would have been like back in like olden days when you were like tending to your own house or whatever. You had a wee farm,
I
you're
don't know if it worked that way.
doing trade
Yeah.
or whatever. You probably just worked every day then. I'm not sure if it was like long working days or whatever it was. But I was looking back at some research that said that like factory workers like during like the mid 19th century could be expected to work up to like 100 hours a week and stuff like that. And it's not.
Right. Right.
It's been more of like a 20th century revelation where like working hours have been cut like right back. It was like a 7-day working week and then it cut back to 6. And then there was a couple of like pioneers that really, towards the beginning of the 20th century, I think Henry Ford was one of them in America, who
Hmm.
basically just one day was like, okay, we're cutting back the 6-day working week and we're now going to do 5. And I'm going to like pay everyone the same the same money as they make now. And it was like
Sure.
it was totally like out there at the time. I'm not
Wow.
don't know if he was the first to do it or not, but he was definitely in America, sort of like
Aye, one of their names. Uh-huh.
one of the driving forces for it. So it's not uncommon for this to happen over the last, however long that the working week has been reduced and reduced and reduced. And I guess it kind of makes sense, like as the world gets more efficient at doing things, as we start to develop more better ways to like grow food, better ways to maintain the roads, to all manners of sort of careers and occupations, we get better at doing it. It kind of makes
Right.
sense that people would work less to get the same sort of output, right? It becomes more efficient.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. I suppose when you're talking about like Victorian Britain or whatever, most of would have been people working like mills, and like big industrial factories, and it would have been extremely manpower intensive as opposed to these days where we do automate these processes. You're probably right. Although, am I correct in? Well, I don't know. So we're talking about how we're basically making our processes more efficient in order to make people turn up to work less. Are people like? How's that? How can we expect businesses to pay people the same amount? Are they just going to do this because they think it's a better thing to do? Like, we're getting more efficient. Sure, surely that just means companies are going to try and save more money.
Well, that might be the case, and like I say, I do starting to really think that money is like a lot of the cause of like corruption in the world. So that's one of my concerns when it comes to the 4 day working week. But for as long as I can remember, I've been like thinking about my career. So I started my job like 3 years ago or something like that, and I think it was relatively quickly into that I realized that like the 5 days was like a long period of time, and like you only get the 2 days at the weekend, and that it's like come and gone before you realize what's even happened.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, I'm in quite a privileged position though, where I work in like quite a good field. I've got like a good degree, and I make a decent bit of money. So
Cushy, cushy.
yeah, I started thinking about, when I get to a certain point, if I become like a chartered engineer, I can be making like a decent salary. And at that point, I don't really spend a lot of money, to be honest. I'm not very materialistic. I tend to save a lot more than I spend when my paycheck like comes in.
Mm.
So I started thinking about, I'm going to get all these promotions if I become chartered. I'm going to get more and more salary. Once I get to like a really good salary, I could probably cut back to like 4 days a week. And I was even thinking about actually like the pay cut as well. Like I wasn't even like
All
worried.
right. Okay.
I wasn't even worried about cutting back to 4 days a week and still earning the same money. I got to the point where I was thinking I'd actually probably take 80% of my wages once it gets to a certain point.
You must
Cut
work 30 hours or
Yeah,
whatever.
to work like 32 hours and to get like a Friday off or a Monday off or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So but I'm in quite a privileged position where I can do that. But this is what they're talking about here, which I thought was quite radical actually, was to reduce the working week to 4 days and to kind of still pay people the same amount, which I didn't think was possible before I
Right.
started researching into this. But it turns out actually it has been done in the past.
So, right. Okay. So, I guess the reason companies would do this, the only reason that companies would ever do this, is because they believe that doing this will make them more money. Right. That's the one takeaway that we know that companies do. They operate on profit. So, is that what you're saying? I guess that's what you're saying right now. The idea is that by actually reducing hours, people will be able to output more than what they'd do if it was over a 5 day period.
Well, it might be the case. I don't know. I've had a look at some of the research, and there, as I've been going through some of the websites and the articles that I've been reading, that it's overwhelmingly positive actually. The stuff that I've kind of been seeing. There's been some
Mm-hmm.
negative, and I think there's more negatives that I'd probably put into the equation as well, thinking about how companies like operate these days. But we can only assume that, like, when Henry Ford was talking about this at the beginning of the 20th century, his company was about like making money then as well. It was about like
Right.
growth.
Sure.
Like
Sure.
it was still in the market, it was still in the landscape that we exist in today. Maybe the pressure wasn't as much because the ceiling was like higher for them. Like when it comes to like cars and like automobiles at the time, there was probably a lot of room for like improvement.
Yeah, I think also for the company, like companies like pioneers like that, the reason they could make these decisions is because they probably had huge amounts of money in the bank, and this was like it wasn't the same risk, a gamble that I think a modern day company might be taking. I sure this is the type of thing that a company could try and go out of business after doing this for like 6 months, you know, potentially, right?
It might be the case because I know a lot of companies. When you heard about like these airlines in the pandemic that were operating like right on the very cusp, and all of a sudden they stopped
Yeah.
making money for a little bit, and it was like, okay, we're probably going to go bust like immediately if the government don't like do something.
When there's really very fine margins.
Yeah, so if you take the airline industry for example, you know, when you're talking about improvements that have been made to like the quality there to make planes more efficient, to try and
Hmm.
generate more money out of them, that must be getting like really, really difficult. Whereas back in like the beginning of the 20th century, must have been technological improvements being on cars like all the time, stuff that was like
Yeah,
cutting
yeah.
back the hours that were required to make engines, to make parts. So there would have been like ways to really enhance your company's like profitability, technologically advancing it. Whereas today it's maybe a bit harder to keep these technological advancements up. So companies start to look at different ways how they can make more money, and these like immediately they start looking at like, can we make more money off the employees? So like I'm probably more pessimistic about doing it in this day and age because companies would look for a way to sort of one up the people that work there. You know, they're looking for like dodgy backdoor ways to make money now, as opposed to how can we increase the product or the quality of the thing we're offering, sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess what we really want is a scenario which is completely mutually exclusive. And to be honest, though, most people that describe this whole concept of 4-day working week to me, it does seem more or less mutually exclusive. Like the benefits to the employee, like just the obvious ones that occur to me, you know, are like, you know, having extra free time and having additional flexibility and like working to your own well, I guess those are the main ones actually. Now I think about it, I can think of. And when it comes to companies, I presume that the idea is that people will be more efficient in the way they work. I don't know. It kind of comes back to, I remember my papa ages ago tell me about back when he was working in the ICI, which is like an old petrochemical company. They were one of the first companies at the time that introduced like what was known at the time as time and energy motion studies, which is basically the ideas of trying to improve efficiency in the workplace. And it was like, you know, the idea is that when it comes to designing an office, you know, let's make sure that the paper is next to the printer, because that means that
Sure.
when it runs out, you don't have to walk across the building. You know, and it was like, it was all this idea of coming up with like very, very minute efficiencies in order to improve the overall profitability and how a company operates. And like we're talking like 60 years ago is when this was first introduced, and that's not stopped. We're still moving in that same direction, and now it seems like companies are looking at more out the box ways of potentially squeezing, I guess, more profitability, well, more potential out of their employees. That makes me ask though, like, why do you think people would be able to achieve more if they had an extra day or they were only working 4 days?
Well, I think back to times at my work now. When I look at the time that I've been at my company, the 3 years that I've been there, there's definitely been a period of time there where I've been like flat out 5 days. You know, I do a 5 day working week. It's Monday to Friday. It's 9 to 5 every day.
Hmm.
And there's one period I can think of in particular where it was like a 4 month period where I was like flat out at my work, and it was like every day I turned up and I worked my ass off. I like
Crunch time.
absolutely
Hmm.
scrammed my lunch and got back to work, and it was like 9 to 5 like every single day. And there's maybe something to be said for that because I genuinely believe that your work needs like a lot of like a high pressure. There needs to be like a high pressure
Oh, there used to be a pressure,
atmosphere at
definitely.
your work. Otherwise, you just don't do anything.
Hmm. Hmm.
So when that was kind of happening, my company was kind of going to this like crunch time, and we were having to like churn out a lot of work. I was getting a lot of shit done. You know, it was a high intensity time, and things really were getting done. But I also think about like the stress that I probably felt during that time.
Right.
Like work was like a really intense period, and like getting home was like really tiring, and it was like on your mind sort of thing. You know, you were like thinking
Yeah,
about it
yeah,
all the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
So it's like,
What do I need to do tomorrow morning once I get in?
yeah, kind of like thinking about the pressures of like tomorrow. It's like not. I wouldn't say it was like a really awful experience, but like it wasn't particularly enjoyable to
Yeah, I
be
know what you
in
mean.
that sort
Hmm.
of really high pressure atmosphere. And then like I flip that on its head and I think about the times where like I've had like a week off, you know, when you take like a week of annual leave and you come back on the Monday and you feel like super recharged and you're like
Hmm.
ready to just tackle whatever comes at you. And that morning you fire out, you go through your emails like rapid, and you fire out a bunch of emails, you get everything sorted, you get a bunch of tasks to do, and like the day just kind of flies by. And because you've had that time off, you're
Mm,
re-energized to do it, you know.
yeah.
So I can see how there would be like a mix there, where if I had like maybe a 4 day week where I had like a good amount of pressure, but I also had like a longer time to recharge my batteries, I can see how that 4 days might become like a really productive 4 days, you know?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of what I was assuming. Is because like the idea is that you'd be trying to get the same amount done, but you've got less time to do it, so you're just much more incentivized to get it done. Instead of working, instead of working till 5 o'clock each day, you wouldn't be worried about when you have to leave. You need to worry about you need to get that done by that time because otherwise you fucked up for this week type of thing. And so I that yeah that makes sense to me. That's where it comes from in terms of why you'd work hard. You're literally imposing a kind of potentially more stressful environment on yourself, and that's pushing you to go further. And sure, I get what you mean. I definitely excel in my work when there's a impetus to move. See if I need something done by the end of the day, that's going to be a much more efficient day than if I've got to the end of the week. It's because
Sure.
that's the amount of time you've got to fill it out in. So that's that makes sense. But you're right. I have to wonder if that over long periods of time would end up to potential like people burning out at a higher rate than they're already burning out. But right, like you said, you've now got 3 days to recharge instead of 2 days. So see when you phrase it like that, it doesn't necessarily sound as good as it was before. What to sum it up and shortly, what you can say is you're going to work yourself more like a dog, and you're going to take an extra day off for it as fucking respite. Like, mm, I can see how that would be something that would actually isn't not universal. That'd be a type of thing that people would have more inclinations towards, right?
Well, another thing about it is though, the amount of weeks that I've been at my work, and like I've done like 40 hours of work, and
Mm.
if I look back and I say to myself, I probably could have done that in like 32 hours. Like if I only had like 4 days to do that in, I would have still done it. Like you say, like, you get a task and it's like, so I'd be get this done by the end of the day, or like get done by the end of the week or something like that. If you're like really organized at your work and you plan ahead, I could probably squeeze my 5 days into four. I could
Mm-hmm.
probably do that, and it wouldn't necessarily be me in a really intense, high pressure atmosphere. It would just be me taking less time to like maybe chat away to my colleagues. Like,
Yeah, uh-huh.
the
That's part of work though, isn't it? It's like you don't. That's what I do worry about. Like some people, like I probably like yourself, would be able to turn up to work every day and sacrifice that dead time in order to make it work time. But part of work is the dead time, is the chatting to colleagues, is standing at the coffee machine, like, and as well, like that's assuming that you are working a usual everyday week. When it does come to like serious crunch time in businesses, like working a 40 work week would feel like torture. I can imagine if I was like really, really busy at work and I like have a bunch of work to do, I'd be like, fuck, I wish I could just come in tomorrow and get this done instead I'm gonna have to worry about it on Monday, right? So
Sure, there definitely is something to be said for like the time that you spend at work that you need to be doing, like going to the kitchen and grabbing a coffee with your colleague, and like, or taking like a 5 minute break every
that's important.
every hour or something like that. Yeah, those are really important. It's almost like a mini recharge, when you
Right,
you
right.
work for 2 hours and you're like, oh, let's go get a coffee now, like, so I can kind of recharge for like 10 minutes. But there's also definitely, if you're not under a lot of pressure, those time periods extend. You know what I mean? Like, you
Yes,
won't you
yes.
don't sit like you maybe the 10 minute break that you needed to take will now be
It's a
15.
half
It'll be
hour,
20.
yeah. Yeah.
You'll be on your computer and you'll be like, I'll take a 5 minute break, and you'll go on Google, and all of a sudden it'll be like 15 minutes later. I think those kind of things happen as well. So there's definitely like a fine, there's like a balance to be found there. But when I think about a 4 day working week, I don't think I would be interested to like trial it out, but I don't think I would struggle to fit the 5 working days that I do right now into 4 days if I like
Mm.
had to. And I think I would very much enjoy the 3 day weekend like more. That's the reason that I want to do it anyway. I don't imagine myself like cutting back to 4 days a week when I become like a chartered engineer
Sure,
and
sure,
doing
yeah.
less work. I imagine
Mm-hmm.
myself just doing the same amount of work, maybe in a bit more pressured atmosphere, which I think I quite enjoy. And I think is
Mm-hmm.
probably productive. But then also having that third day off at the weekend, where like 10 years down the line or whatever, I've got another day to spend time with my family. I could pick up the kids that day, like, from school or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, it seems like a really a beneficial thing to do, because once you've like at the weekend, I don't know if it's like to you, but Saturday's kind of like come and gone, you know, and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
when
yeah.
it comes to Sunday, it's like
Work
work
tomorrow.
tomorrow, you know. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that third day I think would really help.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking about the idea that, like, as much as I'm saying that like people might find it, wish they had that extra day, if we were to like implement a 4-day working week like we're talking about, then eventually like this whole concept of if only I'd had an extra day, it just wouldn't exist. Your entire schedule would become revolved around these 4 days, and you'd be trying to do the same amount of work, obviously, as before, and like maintain the same workload, but it'd be the type of thing that you just adapt to very, very quickly. I think. I don't know. Now that I've talked about it, it seems to me as if this is the type of thing I don't know if you can force people to do. I feel that there are some people that might be very happy with the way that it work out. I'm thinking of like managers. See managers
Sure.
at my work, man. Like they actually are working at like peak efficiency. Some of these guys all the time, and it's like asking them to do what they're currently doing in less time. It's not possible. So this must affect different workplaces and different industries to different extents. Like you and I both work in offices, and I can see it definitely being applicable to working in an office. But like manufacturing, how I don't see how that could, because there's a physical amount of time it takes you to put a wheel on a car type of thing. You can't expect people to do more what cars coming down the production line when you're saying, well, you've only got 4 days to do it now. It's like, well, production lines only move at that speed, so what the hell can I do about it? So this will never be, now think about it, a blanket thing. This won't be like a government thing. This will be businesses implementing it, right?
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about is if in some of the studies, and I'll talk about some of these studies in just a moment, but
Mm-hmm.
in some of these studies, they're seeing like productivity is like increasing, in the time that people are actually there, because they feel more recharged. I guess they've got in the 4 days they end up like they're more efficient.
Motivated, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So is there maybe something to be said for, you pay people, because if you're expecting someone to commute like one less day a week or something like that, I think it would be reasonable for you to say like they can take a cut in their wages to like accommodate the fact that they're not like doing that. You know what I mean? Like the travel expenses or whatever. I can't imagine that there would be like just a flat, you get paid exactly the same these days. I can't see a scenario in which that
No,
happens.
yeah.
But
Uh-huh.
maybe it could be linked to like the productivity. So you could look at how productive someone is being over that 4 days and compared to the 5 days. And like you're saying, there are people out there, even today that still work like 6 days a week. I know
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
dad's one of them. If he gets overtime at the weekend, he'll like take it and he'll do 6 days a week. And he'll try and make more money, and he's like productive when he's there. When he gets a job,
Yeah.
it gets done, sort of thing.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
no
yeah,
doubt
yeah.
that if
Uh-huh.
we went to a 4 day working week, there would still be people that did 5 days and maybe even like 6 days. And
Mm-hmm.
if they want to do that, I guess that's okay. I just, in the time that you are there, if you're like getting paid equally to the productivity that you're having, and you're there like less, maybe they could like then hire more staff. Like
Yeah.
if they could like hire an extra staff member that would be able to cover the shifts that are there, and then they could increase overall productivity. So like you still be sort of inputting the same amount of money for the same amount of output. The ratio would still be the same, if that makes sense.
So what you're talking about, the idea is that one person doesn't turn up to work one day of these weeks, but in this scenario, they're not being paid their full salary, and that money will then the business can then like reinvest that in by bringing on more workers.
Yeah, so if
Maybe
there's
I'm
like
a bit
say
confused
for
there.
example there's a yard and there's 5 guys that work in the yard. We cut back to
Mm.
4 days a week. So let's say for example in this scenario, each of the guys gets a different day off. So one gets Monday off, one gets Tuesday off, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You could
Mm.
hire another guy that would be able to cover their shifts like on those days. And one of the benefits that I've seen to the 4 day working week is that apparently it actually improves or it decreases unemployment, which is one of those like secondary effects. I'm not exactly sure
Mm.
how it does it, but it's like a sort of knock on effect to reducing the time elsewhere. It decreases unemployment, so you can maybe hire another guy, and you could try to be sort of more productive, because the guys that are working, they're in 4 days, they would be working more productively in the time that they are there, and
Yeah.
but there's still the same amount of guys that are there overall in the week. So you could maybe be increase that productivity across the week, and you'd be getting more output. You know, you'd be paying a bit more money into salary, but you'd be seeing the
Mm.
benefits and the efficiency.
Yeah, yeah, sure, exactly. As much as you would be paying more by taking on an extra person, the idea is that people will be working a net extra productivity each day. What you're describing is just like a potential great benefit to businesses. And I don't know if this is true or not, but I always kind of feel that when there's a benefit to the business, that kind of means that the employees must be getting the short end of the stick in some way or another. And I guess in that this concept, it would just come from the idea that these guys that are working in the yard would need to up their game. You know, like I don't know how easy it is. We're talking about. I can understand how you or I in our workspace could be more productive and trying to fit in things in certain times. But I'm thinking of like working on a yard where you're like lugging things in vans and going off to site and installing things. Like I don't see how that can work the same way. But yes, your analogy that you're applying does work perfectly to certain businesses. Now I'm thinking about it, which yeah, it's just another pro for businesses, really.
But there must be some sort of like inefficiency in like those examples as well. You're talking about guys that are like lugging things across the yard or whatever, and that there must be like some like the inefficiencies that we see in the office is like spending time on Google or like going to getting a coffee or whatever. They must have those breaks as well. You know, they must like
Mm.
do all those things. Like they've got their quota for the day. Like they've got to fill out. Say a logistics company has to fill 4 vans or whatever. They'll spend their 8 hours or their 10 hours filling
I
out those
guess
four
so.
vans. If they were only there for 4 days, you know, maybe they could do a fifth van sort of thing, and they would try and like squeeze that in to get the fifth day off. But I'd imagine in those
Yeah.
atmospheres as well, those are the guys that are like working like long hours, and I think in those scenarios they actually might enjoy working the hours. Like I know my dad like likes working for the money. I know that he does that, and like he always takes the overtime, whereas I wouldn't. Like I don't like to take the overtime. I'd rather have a time off. So these guys are like these are the ones that are working like 50-hour weeks, 55-hour weeks anyway. And they can still do that. You know, we're not saying like it would be illegal to do that. It's just
Hmm.
like normalize the 4 day working week as opposed to, you know, reducing everyone's hours. You can say you can still work if you want.
Yeah. See, excuse me. On the flip side of that, though, like I've worked in a yard, and it's the sign factory that I mentioned in another episode. And absolutely fucking the hellhole that was, you know, because it was like in a really horrible area, and everyone was fucking absolutely rage.
One of those
But like,
toxic masculine
oh
places,
oh,
yeah.
oh yeah, like proper like everyone just like boozers at work and that type of thing, you know. It's like sipping their Coke cans that smells a bit fucking strong, you know.
Wolf whistling at
Um,
women as they go past, yeah.
yeah, oh yeah, that type of thing all over. And like this is the type of environment that if they were told they're working for 4 days, they would not increase their productivity. Like I don't I don't care how, either the manager or whoever's like the line manager for these people. And by the way, for this company, there's nothing as formal as a line manager. You know, it's just people like there's someone that tries to get them to do their jobs. That their job would become impossible because now they're going to be asking for them who give 0% effort an extra 20% every single day. You know, which is I can understand how the idea of a 4 day working week being really useful for people that are relatively self motivated, but for people that do turn up to work and regardless of what that work is, they're just going to try and do the absolute minimum and get away at home as soon as possible. It kind of falls apart. So that's kind of making me thinking that maybe we shouldn't be thinking about work days at all. Maybe we should just be trying to like come up with some type of like financial system, like you mentioned, that is completely based off of like productivity. So like these people that work, they don't get paid per hour. You know, they get paid per jobs that they go out and do, per van that they go and fill out. Because that's the only way that you really can that I could really can see these people being motivated enough to change their degree of productivity.
Yeah, and you know, as soon as we start speaking about stuff like that, when you're talking about, there are people at my work like that as well. There's people at every work, you know, there's
Ah.
the freeloaders that just come in and they try to do the bare minimum. And I personally don't understand that because I'd much rather be busy at my work. I'd much rather be constantly doing something, like learning something new
Got
in
you.
the
Mm-hmm.
in the 8 hours that I'm there. But I know there are people that will just turn up and they'll try and do like as little as they possibly can. So I don't know how you can account for that if you were to take a 4 day working week. But I guess the only way you would be able to look at it is if you applied the 4 day working week to everyone in the hope that the productive people that were there made like enough. It was it would be a net gain sort of thing. Whereas people who
Yeah.
are like freeloading, they don't do any extra. but the people that actually are productive, they're doing more and they're doing all the work anyway. So,
Mm. Yeah,
'cause
well, that's what I was.
it could
Yeah,
just be an overall gain. You don't look at like each individual person, but like for the workplace in total. I think that's how these studies have kind of looked at it. On the flip side of that, though, I find it difficult to see a scenario in which companies won't start taking like advantage of this. And I mean, the first thing they're going to be like is, well, people will do more work, and essentially they'll do more work in the 4 days that they're there, but they'll try and like pay them less money to do so. I can't imagine
oh
companies
yeah,
won't try and like chop off a day of your salary, but
yeah.
still
Oh no,
try to
it won't
make
even
you
do
do the
that.
same work.
Yeah, they'll just like I'm telling you right now, man. This will be the type of thing that all of a sudden, over the course of several years, median salaries will go down. It'll be the type of thing that average median salary for a chemist in 2020 was 35 grand. 10 years from now, after a 4 working week, it just will creep down to 32 for some reason. It
Yeah,
has to be something like that. It's because all we talk about is how businesses they are driven mindlessly towards generation of profits, and there's definitely an opportunity here to make more profits out of increased profitability. But it seems like there's a huge opportunity to further exploit workforces.
yeah.
And I don't know how you even could try to regulate something like that. I don't think you can really.
I'm also thinking about companies that would like try and shorten you to a 4 day working week, but would try and cover the hours in those days. So that like I would be known as like compressing the hours of 5 days
Right.
into 4 days. Now I have this conversation with like a lot of people at my work, and I just had it with you before the show as well, where I personally think that if I took the 8 hours on a Friday that I work and I put 2 hours into Monday through Thursday so that I still did 40 hours in the week but
Yeah.
got Friday off, I would fucking hate that because
Yeah. Yeah.
Monday through Thursday, you wouldn't be able to do anything with your night. You'd basically be coming home, you'd be getting something to eat, and you'd be sort of like winding down. I like to go to the gym, I like to play some games, I like to like do things on those nights. So it doesn't really appeal to me to do that. And I also think that maybe it's 8 hours for a reason. Like we have to like this is the thing I'm always saying when I'm like, instead of trying to like shake it up immediately, we have to start looking at, well, why is it like this in the first place? And I'm thinking to myself, maybe it's like 8 hours because that's about when someone starts to get fucking pissed off at their work, and
Yeah.
it's the
Okay.
time where they like want to go home. So if you increase it to like 10 hours, because I think about even like now on like a Friday afternoon, I start to like dwindle and like what I'm doing. I start to like wrap things up at about 3 o'clock.
Mm.
And the last 2 hours I'm kind of like not really productive. I'm kind of finishing things off to go home for the weekend. If I added like 2 hours onto Monday through Thursday, how much would I really get done between 5 and 7?
Yeah. I do get what you're saying. I like don't get me wrong. See, I think the thing about me, where I'm coming from, this like concept of compressed time, is that like just that having that extra day, kind of what we're talking about, it is an extra day to potentially recharge, and you are working yourself harder throughout the week, but it's not what we're talking about with like the reduced working hours. The idea is the reduced working hours, you're increasing productivity, but with compressed hours, you are literally just increasing the time, so it's like 10 hours a day or something like that, and that's one of those ones where it has to be personal preference to an extent. Like I personally liked it. I personally like having an extra day off for my weekend that I was able to take advantage of. And you're right, the work day probably felt longer and it probably felt a little bit harder. And I would be willing to bet that you're right. See those last 2 hours, like up till 6 o'clock at night or something like that, you probably see a much more drastic drop in productivity. So in terms of from a business perspective, it probably might not be the way forward. In terms of like from person to person, I can see it just being much more personal. It's because I get where you're coming from, but basically, reduced working hours just seems better in every single way compared to compressed working hours, though.
Yeah, I feel like I see it in the office when I look around. When it gets to like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the
Mm,
evening, you look around and people are just like talking. They're doing
yeah,
less. When they come in the morning, they like do stuff. I feel like, but the later and later you get in the day, the more they start like packing their things away. Like 4:45, I'm starting to like, oh, it's almost time to go home.
yeah.
I better start turning things off. Like I'm like,
Waiting for the bell to ring,
yeah, I'm like moving my mouse across the screen slowly to like go to the shutdown button. I'm like, if I take 2 minutes to do this, I'll be, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I I think that every morning when you come in, it's almost like a mini reset. When you go home, that's like sort of recharging the batteries, and you come in the next morning and you
uh-huh.
feel sort of regenerated. I just can't see any scenario in my head where I take those hours, put them Monday to Thursday, and like maybe I would be, maybe it would be like a trial thing where you could like go through and see, but I can't imagine I'd get much done.
Yeah.
between the hours of like 5 and 7.
Mm.
Um, so
I
I'd
think
be
it's
more likely to be burned out, I think.
yeah, I get it. I think there are some industries as well where being able to work 10 hours is like necessary for the job. For instance, like I think in like healthcare, they need a mixture of people that work 5 days a week and like 4 days a week. It's because those people that work the 4 days a week, they're able to stay there for a little bit longer when shifts are being handed over and stuff like that. There are definitely scenarios where it's just necessary. But overall, yeah, I agree with you. It seems like one of those ones that we would improve the general standard of living, and it seems like companies profits by just paying people extra. Although, yeah, I don't know how likely that possibly is to ever happen. 10 hours is a long time,
Yes, so I've sent a couple of links. I'll just put them on the screen now. That
right?
are a couple of like examples of companies that have done it, and like I say, I struggle to find examples of, and I don't know if maybe the articles online were just like sort of advocating for it or whatever, but
Right.
it's like anecdotal evidence of companies that have trialed like a 4 day working week, and there's sort of more general evidence as well. Whereas if for example, if you look at the countries that are like the most productive countries in the world, and this is like I think it's like Germany, like
I was gonna say
Scandinavia,
Germany, yeah.
places like that, their working weeks are like drastically shorter than the working weeks of like the UK, for example. And if you look at countries like Japan and like China and stuff like that, their working weeks are like a lot longer. But they get like a lot more stuff done, I think. But they also are there for like a longer period of time in the week. So you can see how it might be like a sort of trade off.
Diminishing returns maybe after a certain amount of hours
Yeah, but they're working so many more hours that they actually
that they
are
will
they are
inevitably.
doing more stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a company in New Zealand called Perpetual Guardian, who started the 4 day working week, and they reported across 240 employees, they reported lower stress in the employees, and a 20% rise in productivity. So they cut the working week by 20% down to 80%, and then they've seen a 20% rise in that time. So it didn't quite go back up to like 100%, but it got to like 96%. So you're talking about
What?
like,
Yeah. A lot of gain. A lot of gain.
yeah, 4%. And if you looking at the stress levels, people that were happier with their work life balance, the scores increased from 54% to 78% of people being like happy. There's a couple of other examples where there's one in Microsoft Japan, where they noted they went down to 4 days, and they've got like 2,300 employees, and their productivity went up by 40%, which is like
Bloody hell.
absolutely mental. Because I was talking about like Japan and China being like total workhorses. Like maybe you can see how these people would extremely benefit from that, because if their working weeks are extremely long, seeing like the more reduction they saw, the more it would kind of go up. So it kind of almost advocates for the idea that they have like diminishing returns for like the longer working weeks, like you were just saying.
Hmm. Although just reading that one about Microsoft Japan though, it raises an interesting point, which is like people that have 3 days off a week, they might be much less likely to take holidays off as well. That can be one of those angles that I can see businesses taking advantage of. For instance, you can work a 4 day week and you'll get paid a salary for a 5 day working week. It's just that you don't get any holiday, or like your holiday is vastly reduced or something like that. It's because
Yeah,
it kind of makes sense. You are getting an extra 20% of your time off.
yeah, I can see that one being a sort of like trade off for it, especially. But like you'd need less holidays to go away as well. So if you
Right,
only work a
yeah.
4 day week, so you'd only need like 8 days to take 2 weeks off as opposed to like the
Mm,
10.
mm.
So there'd be some like up and down there. Also, one of the I was talking about knock-on effects earlier. The Microsoft Japan example, they also saw a 23% reduction in weekly electricity use in
Mm,
the office,
mhm, mhm.
and a 59% decrease in the number of pages printed by employees, which is
What
like
the fuck?
which
Where
is
does that come
weird.
from? Yeah. That's very weird.
So some of these examples actually go on to talk about how it's like environmentally friendly to work a 4 day
Okay.
week, because the countries that like tend to work less hours per week on average, they actually have smaller carbon footprints than the
Right. Okay.
countries that
Okay.
work like longer hours. So you're
Mhm.
not only seeing like they're reporting benefits here of like happiness, of productivity, but you're also seeing benefits for like the environment, which is like,
Mm.
mind boggling. We're seeing like, and I've been talking about this for so long, where we should be looking at something that's like not, we should stop looking at the bottom line and thinking that's like the be all and end all, and we should be looking at things like happiness and seeing if we can like increase those things. And
Sure.
like this one seems to have like so many positive effects in like the right direction, that it's kind of tough to ignore. It's tough to have a look at it and not think we should at least be like investigating this a bit further, which it doesn't seem to really be happening in the UK.
Yeah, I guess this is the type of thing that's probably companies just feel is potentially risky, and it's the type of thing as well that I can see, like, certainly a big company, if they do introduce a 4-day working week and then take it back again, employees might be somewhat disgruntled by that, and they might not appreciate being used for guinea pigs in that type of way. But you're right, it seems quite stark when we're reading some of these, the improvements they've seen in productivity and all these crazy benefits. Why this isn't the way things currently are, another thing I was going to say was in terms of benefits I haven't seen mentioned before here is that presumably as well, if people weren't at work, then they would be more likely to be spending money. The idea of this would be that this could potentially improve the economy as well. It's because hours that you would usually be working away, saving money, you are now outside of the house, potentially spending it some other way.
I guess so. So you would be out consuming these things, but I'm not. I don't know how that would affect people in terms of like, because people kind of live to their means. You know what I mean? So like, if they had like an extra day to like spend their money, I wonder what that would do to like their finances and stuff like that.
Yeah. I
I'm not
don't think it
exactly
would
sure.
potentially be yeah, I'm not saying it would be a good thing for people. I'm saying it would be potentially a good thing for the economy.
Yeah, which we can only guess what that means, to be honest. I hear people say it's good for the economy, and I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, people say that all the time. It's like, oh, it's great for the economy. I'm like, I'm not sure who that's great for, but as long as you're happy, I guess.
Yeah. As long as money's being spent and interest is staying low.
Yeah, whatever the hell that means. So there was another company called MRL Recruitment, and they went on, and I noticed one of the things since I've been at my workplace is that staff turnover is like unusually like high at my work. It feels like.
Oh, burnout, yeah, that type of thing.
And this company did like a 6 month trial with a 4-day working week, and they found that their staff retention was like 95%. And I'm not sure what their value of that was before,
yeah.
but they're reporting that it went up. So they also noted a productivity increase of 25%. But if you're like keeping the staff that you have on as well, you're not having to train new staff. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering what sort of benefit you see to like keeping the same staff around, because they'll be doing the work more efficiently anyway, because they're more experienced, they already know how to do it. So there might even be like positives that we're not seeing here, that are not getting reported through things like staff retention.
Yeah, I'm seeing here many opportunities for these effects to start compounding on themselves. Like the idea is that people would be less stressed. That's probably tightly related to the fact that they have increased productivity. The fact that people are taking less days off is due to the fact that they're less stressed, and that would also affect like staff retention. Better staff retention means better people stay in the business for longer. Like all of these thus far that you've shown me on this website, you definitely tie into each other and do seem, yeah, like you said, very good.
Yeah, and the same company also reported that short-term absences were cut by 40%. So it's talking about like illnesses, like
Almost
stress,
days, yeah.
stress-related days off, things like that. Because apparently we in the UK, apparently we have like 5.5 million days a year that are like
Lost.
stress-related. So
Just stress. Wow.
if those were like cut, but imagine that was like cut by like 40%.
Mm.
You could invest those days back into your company by like, if it was a 4-day week, you'd like get some of those days back. We're talking about 40% of like 5.5 million. It's over two. It's
Yeah,
over
yeah,
two
yeah, yeah.
million days that you'd be like getting back, and it's almost like a day off for every like 1 in 12 people, like every year sort of thing. So you're claiming them back in like other ways. Another other website that I showed you was the pros and cons of a 4-day working week. It's pretty much sort of saying the same sort of thing. They also noted there are like discrepancy in the numbers when it comes to like inequality. So when this company did research on the gender pay gap, and it showed that there's like a bunch of people in the UK. There's roughly 2 million British people that are currently not in employment due to childcare responsibilities, and 90% of those are women. So you can only assume that a 4-day working week would cut back on like the intensive nature of like having a full-time job. Because I know there are definitely women at my work that have like 2 or 3 kids, and they work like a part-time sort of like 30 hours a week deal,
Yeah.
where they come in at like 9:30 and leave at like 2:30 or something like that, 3:30, and it means they can go and like pick up their kids. So it might also drive things like inequality down. And we know when we speak about we spoke previously about inequality and about how like countries are dealing with things like maternity leave and paternity leave maybe in the wrong way. But this is like an outside of the box solution that like I'd never really. It has like so many effects on different areas that I'd like never thought about, like saving the environment and like driving down inequality. Like if these are like things that this could potentially be doing, I don't know why it's not being investigated on a more broader scale.
Yeah, man. I feel like there's something we're not seeing here, right? Like
There must be.
businesses, yeah. Like I don't really see it. It's because we're not even like, because the only thing I can imagine this being held back by is businesses saying, "Oh no, this isn't going to work out the way people are working it out." But from the discussion you and I are having, we're actually worried about businesses taking it a step further and making like even more benefits out of this by like exploiting it to some extent. I genuinely, for what we've discussed this, Sarah, I don't really understand if this data is true, why there isn't more looking into it. Unless, like, I know there's like 8 companies here on that other website, but like maybe that's just not enough for people to really think about. Like maybe this is the bare minimum that's required for this thing to get brought up in the media every 10 years and every 4 or 5 years, and then gets forgotten again, and we just need like a much bigger push in that direction.
Well, a lot of the things that we talk about when we speak about like innovation, for example, that company, the first one that I just showed you, Perpetual Guardian, they're
Mm.
based in New Zealand. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we spoke about the reaction to COVID-19, like in the world, and we spoke about how New Zealand were one of the best countries. Maybe it's just something to do with the culture there at the moment. Maybe something to do with how the government is politically aligned. I don't know, but there seems to be like a lot of like good things going on there, and it's not even for like people who are like left leaning or like libertarian. See, when I watch shows, like, have you ever seen that show? It's like Australian border control, and it's like
I know what
literally
you're
just
talking about.
people trying to get through the borders in Australia, and like their border control is like extremely strict.
Hmm.
That's like a really popular like right wing sort of policy in the UK right now. You know, where it's like against immigration, like wants stricter
Yeah.
rules on
Harder
immigration.
borders. Hmm.
It just seems like they're doing something right. You know, there's something to be said for the fact that like Australia and New Zealand just seem to be like handling things really well at the moment. You know, like under the radar.
Yeah, it does seem they have, I suppose, strong social policies that seem to be making them happier, which is strange. Exactly, there's this idea I feel that has been kind of going around that the UK has just been like working people to the fucking bone, you know, like we've never, like, I think in terms of like I remember reading a study a while ago which was looking at the total time spent related to work, and this doesn't mean like work in the office. It means the amount of time that you spend driving to work, the amount of time you spend on your emails, the amount of time you spend in work, and then the amount of time once you're back home doing like work related tasks, you know. And it found that I think the UK was one of the highest countries like in the world in terms of the amount that we actually work compared to our free time. And I don't know where that ethos comes from, or you know, because it's like it's not even where does that begin? Is it because our leaders are wanting to push people further to try and make more money? Are we less willing to think of the human element? I don't really understand that, because you're right. These like smaller communities, sorry, these like other countries, like you mentioned, just seem to have a much better grip on keeping people happy, and we seem to be doing the exact opposite of that right now.
Yeah, I don't really know
So,
why it's the case though. I'm not really
no,
sure, and
no,
some,
that's what I'm
I
saying.
guess
Yeah.
maybe it just goes above our heads a little bit. But when to bring it back to when you were talking about how your papa told you about the petrochemical company trying to do
Yeah. Hmm.
like studies to try and improve like
Efficiency.
productivity and efficiency in the time that we're there. And the company that I work at, I haven't been seeing studies like that being carried out. You know, you don't like I don't hear about the company going out their way to make things more efficient. You know, it seems
Mm.
like things are operating on such like they're on the cusp of like breaking down sort of thing. They're just getting by. You know, we're doing enough work to like get it out. There's no like innovation going on. There's no research being put into this, and it seems like this is maybe one of those fields. And I'm not sure why companies wouldn't be seeking to be doing that all the time. And the only thing I can possibly think of is that companies no longer want to do things that will affect this year's bottom line
Right.
in
Right.
order to salvage or to increase the bottom line in like 5 years time, in like 10 years time. You know that it it seems like money these days is all about like short-term gains, and increasing efficiency over the space of 10 years just like isn't a priority in any way, shape, or form anymore. Do you feel the same way at your company?
To an extent, yeah, I do, I agree completely with what you're saying, in terms of like the idea that I think the reason we don't see improvements like this is because companies are so motivated to think about things in the short term. Like, think about what does it actually take to implement trying to have a 4-day work week. You need to like rewrite contracts, you need to get HR involved, you need to cut out working weeks, and like you need to basically like hire extra people to get this sorted out over like a period of time, because it's like a really, really big transition that has to be made. It seems like right now we're working in environments that are already so optimized, and people are already, in my company anyway, like already working at what their limit already is. It's not, you can't just ask some people to, okay, let's innovate for a little bit and find out where we can improve for 5 years down the line from now, because that person's fucking busy. They're not going to do it because they've got a job that's going out the door on Monday, type of thing, and that's all they're caring about. Once again, I feel there is definitely a difference when it comes to like certain types of companies. So the company I work for has a relatively decent chunk of money in the bank, and that means that I do believe they are able to think about efficiencies and like work on projects that are a little bit more long-winded. And like, when it does come to efficiencies, like we are currently redesigning our office. We've redesigned our office like 4 times over COVID, and that's constantly just because of like health and safety regulations, and as they're changing, and we're constantly moving like the parts of the actual workshop itself as well as the office different around, and trying to, we really are having awareness of how to try and make an efficient business. But it's not because we're sitting down and spending days and days putting the work in. It's just because that work's already been established and we're using the content that's already out there. I think you've hit it on the head. It's all to do with the idea of having to put the work in now as opposed to later, and that seems truly systemic in our country.
How realistic is this then? 4-day working week going forward?
Yeah.
Is it going to be soon? Will it be ever?
It's like I said at the very start of this conversation, man. I feel this thing pops its head up every couple of years and it makes a lot of noise. And before this conversation, I hadn't really realized why it always dies down again. But I think it has to do with that. Like, what we're talking about seems brilliant, and it seems like it would involve such a small amount of input work to get such a huge payoff at the end. But I don't know a company that will do it.
Yeah, I definitely, when you're saying, yeah, when you're talking about like hiring someone in to like get this sort of stuff done, that's when I can see the company that I work for like immediately drawing
That'd be
the
a
line.
hard no.
Yeah, it's like we need to give somebody else salary. Like, no, like get out.
Yeah,
So that sort of thing where we need to take someone off the money making project they're on just now, and effectively make them a money black hole for a little while we pay them so that they can do something 5 years down the line. Like, no, that's going to be like a hard no.
Yeah.
And that's when I talk about like companies that aren't doing these like studies, and I feel like my company isn't doing it. It is for that reason. I'm sure it is. It's that when it comes to like innovation projects, like if you're not doing it either A, on your own time, or B, during the time that you're at work anyway, it's like it's not going to happen. So I don't know how there's going to be like a push for this. And even if the government is like, we make the 4-day working week like your standard, I don't see my company being like, yeah, we're adopting that. They're going to be like, no, in order to work here, you still have to work 5 days, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And like that, I don't think that's ever going to be illegal to say that.
No. My thing as well is that it's never going to happen like one out. Well, it obviously does happen. Like, you show those lists of companies, but it's not going to happen that like just the occasional company here or there is going to go to 4 working days. It's because that's going to be a working day in which they're not available to work with every single one of their clients, and their clients are going to fucking hate that. Like I can't see that type of thing going down for like when someone's asking to arrange a meeting and we're like, oh yeah, we just don't do that days. They're like, what do you mean? We need you on the phone every single fucking waking second while this project is going in place, type of thing. So, which is just another thing where I just can't see this ever being implemented unless it was some type of mass scale thing. And yeah, I can just see businesses just going like, no, we're not going to do that.
There's also something to be said for these. Reading out all these trials to you, I'm telling all these benefits, and I'm like, okay, yes, it all seems very good. Why did you guys not continue to do this after the trial ended?
Why was it a trial?
Yeah, okay. It's like you're really like, oh, this is the best thing we've ever done. So why did you stop it? It's like, see you later.
Yeah, man. What I genuinely feel like there's something we're not reading here.
There
Like
must be.
there's something else. Yeah, there's something else. That'll be an interesting one. Hopefully, we can go in if we find something out, give a wee update. Is because this feels like something we're on the cusp of it. You know, another revelation.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, that's it. The 4-day working week sounds pretty great to me, and I'm going to do it no matter what the government says.
Oh, good for you, man. Yeah, that was going to be my last question at the end of it. It's like, so working 4 day working week, is that for you then? Yes or no? Definitely
I think
yes.
it is, and I think, like I said at the beginning of the episode, I would take a pay cut to do it. You know, once I've earned enough money, if I can cut back 20% of my salary, take another day at the weekend, yes, I will be doing that.
Yeah, yeah. I see. I get you. I get you.